Hi, my name is Shannon Gaskell, and I will be doing my presentation on the business differences between nonprofit and for-profit organizations. Community mental health, rehabilitation, and treatment centers, hospitals, schools, and other organizations that provide mental health services can be either nonprofit or for-profit. I'm going to begin by describing what it means to be a nonprofit organization. So nonprofits are a type of business that are formed and exist for the purpose of serving the community, rather than for the accumulation of profits for owners or investors. So while the title says nonprofit, these types of organizations usually do bring in profits. The term profit is the surplus of an organization has at the end of an accounting period. So once all the expenses are taken care of, it's what's left over, which I'm sure a lot of you knew that already. But there isn't a prohibition on nonprofit organizations having profits. They just can't benefit the owner or the investors. They can't receive any part of that. And there are actually laws and rules that forbid this about nonprofit organizations. So every nonprofit has a mission that guides their work and results in the particular services that are provided for the public. Many community mental health agencies and rehabilitation centers are nonprofit organizations, and they provide mental health services often in the form of individual and group therapy, as well as other community prevention, treatment, and educational programs that coincide and support with that organization's particular mission. Nonprofit organizations usually have a board that holds the responsibility of making decisions for the organization, because there aren't any owners that make these types of decisions. That responsibility of making those decisions and determining the values and missions and goals, those are determined collectively by the board. As far as profits are concerned, the profits accrued by these types of organizations must be recirculated back to the organization and used solely for the operation of the organization in order to fulfill its mission. The funds raised are used to improve and maintain the organization's services, as well as address other administrative needs. And this is the main difference between nonprofits and for-profits, is that all the profits obtained is for the betterment of that organization and to help that organization reach its mission or to help fulfill that mission. Profits can also be used to pay salaries and provide benefits for employees. And the salary of a counselor working for nonprofit mental health agencies is usually on the lower end of the salary spectrum for counselors, and I'll explain why in just a second. Nonprofits often receive federal grants and donations. However, nonprofit community mental health has been underfunded for many years. Often there is a struggle to meet the health needs of clients. Budgets are shrinking, fewer counselors are hired, and the number of sessions allowed per client has been increasingly lowered, if that makes sense. It's like there's a ceiling for services a client receives, and once they reach their limit, which is happening more quickly, then they won't be able to receive more services, or there's a process that they have to go through to kind of prove that they need more help. So it's a little bit more complicated. Also, for clients who need help but don't have insurance, don't meet the criteria for a diagnosis, or their insurance doesn't carry their particular diagnosis, they're often denied services. So a lot of this leads to counselors having lower pay yet more clients, because there's not enough funding to hire more counselors, but yet there's still a great need for clients to have help, some mental health help. In the circumstance that a nonprofit organization goes out of business, it's required that the remaining assets are given to another nonprofit. So even though this particular nonprofit might not be able to help the community out, their money and their profits can go toward another nonprofit to be able to serve the community. Nonprofit organizations are usually tax exempt, and it's under the section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, which describes organizations as either serving charitable, religious, scientific, or educational purposes. And of course, they can't have any part of the income going to the benefit of owners or investors. As far as therapeutic orientations go, counselors working in nonprofit mental health organizations are often required to practice evidence-based therapies. There isn't as much freedom there. So now, for-profit organizations, the main goal of this type of organization is that it will go toward the profits will go toward the owner and investors to realize they'll be able to realize gains from the organization. I kind of messed that up. Let me start over. The profits that are gained from the organization can go toward the owner investors. If there are any, the organization has to be successful, of course, for there to be any gains. For-profit organizations generally fall into two categories. Either they're privately owned and operated by a closed group of people, or they're open to allow the public to own shares. And also something, it makes sense, but I just didn't even realize this, is that private practices are considered small businesses and they're considered small for-profit businesses. So the profits, and again, that's after all the expenses are taken care of, what was left over, they are then distributed among the owners and investors of the company. And the owners may decide to put the money back into their organization, but it's ultimately their decision. They have the power to do whatever they want because it's really their money. Legally, it's their money. On the occasion that a for-profit organization goes out of business, its assets can then be liquidated and the proceeds distributed to the owners and investors. And for therapeutic orientations, counselors in for-profit organizations are more likely to have the freedom to practice from their preferred orientation, though some agencies may require evidence-based therapies. In general, there seems to be, it seems to kind of be leading toward that, because insurance companies and government funding, it looks better to have that evidence-based therapy. They're more likely to support that. And then as far as a few more similarities and differences go, one of the big ones is paperwork. That's common among any type of counseling that you do. While state laws vary, documentation is required for all counselors, no matter what role they're in. And a lot of that has to do with billing insurance companies and maintaining client files, progress notes. There's just a lot of paperwork in this field. Forms and requirements differ by agency, whether it is a nonprofit or for-profit, just what they need and what's necessary for their agency and how they operate. It'll just be different depending on agency. Insurance companies especially require an extensive amount of information about clients. Billing and fees. Both nonprofit and for-profit organizations bill insurance companies, and both may allow clients to pay for services using sliding scales based on income, and they might offer discounts if paid in cash on the same day of service. Nonprofit organizations, however, are far more likely to offer free programs and services to the community. Once out of school, new counselors often find jobs in community mental health agencies, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, and there are a lot of benefits to this. Even though it might look grim going into it just based on lower funding and lower pay and just the stress associated with working in agencies because of the higher caseload, there are a lot of benefits to this. Often the agencies allow counselors to work there before getting licensed. There are a variety of clients, different populations that you can work with, illnesses and services offered in agencies that can provide a new counselor with great experiences that can help you throughout your career. The caseloads counselors receive, they are larger, allowing counselors working toward licensure to be able to obtain those needed client contact hours more rapidly. But then again, large caseloads also means more paperwork and more client files to maintain, and more clients to keep track of. And it's important to utilize good self-care when working with agencies where there may be an increased risk for burnout. So you're doing a lot in agencies. It's also helpful that you can build a network with other counselors employed at the agency. Also, there's opportunities for free supervision in an agency. opportunities for paid trainings and conferences, increased knowledge about community resources. Full-time employment comes with benefits. Some agencies have shared confidentiality where cases can be discussed among the counselors employed at the agency, receive feedback in group supervision, and there may be shared liability in the agency. Okay, well, thank you. That's my presentation on the business differences between nonprofits and for-profits, and I hope that was helpful. Thanks.